Today we're talking about breath testing in a DUI case and a very important scientific concept called Henry's Law. This applies in breath test cases and it also applies in blood cases, but today we're going to be talking about it as it relates to breath testing. So let's talk about what Henry's Law is and then we'll dive into why it's important. So Henry's Law is basically this principle that says that if you have a liquid, and so here I have a jar and it's filled with a liquid. And we know that within this liquid there are some contents in there. And so let's say in this case that it is coffee. And we know we have some coffee particles. We know these little dots are coffee smell. And we want to know what happens when we heat this up, or what happens to these molecules. Are they going to transfer out of this liquid? And so if you heat the coffee up, you know that these molecules will leave the coffee and they will enter the air, and you'll have a steaming cup of coffee here and you'll smell that coffee because those molecules have left the liquid and gone into the air. If the coffee cools down, well, then that coffee is not going to have that same amount of smell. You're not going to notice a cold pot of coffee in the morning. You want a roaring hot, nice steaming cup of coffee so that you can smell it and it fills the whole house or the whole Starbucks or whatever you do, and it's going to smell great. That's a little bit of how Henry's Law works. So it's saying that whatever you have in this liquid, at least in a closed system, there will be a proportional ratio of what's in this liquid. There will be a proportionate ratio in the air. So some of these molecules will transfer out into the air, and there will be an equilibrium where there's a very specific ratio between what's in the air and what's in the liquid. And that's a little bit about how Henry's Law works. Now, why this is important in a breath testing case is because this same analogy can happen with your blood and alcohol. So obviously your blood is a liquid material. It is a liquid medium, and it's going to contain alcohol in that. And under certain circumstances, that alcohol is going to leave the blood. There will be a ratio between the alcohol and the alcohol in the air and the alcohol in the blood. There'll be a ratio between those two. And just like a pot of coffee or a cup of coffee, if your body is warmer, more of these molecules of the alcohol are going to escape from that blood, from the medium that is your blood, and it's going to come into the air. So in a breath test case, let's say that this is your stomach, and this is ultimately going to be where the alcohol goes into, and then it goes into your lungs, and then this is your body. Well, the air is coming in, and there's going to be a transfer of the alcohol from your body, which is that system from your stomach into your blood, into your body, and there will be a certain amount of alcohol that leaves the blood, that leaves the liquid, and goes into the air. So if your body is warmer, just like a cup of coffee, more of that alcohol will leave the blood and go into the air. Why that's important is because that exchange is happening in your lungs, and then you're blowing that air out of your mouth into the intoxilizer device. It's into a breath test device. And so if this is a person's body, this is their esophagus, this is their face, and this air is coming out of their mouth, a person's temperature could adversely impact how much of this transfer is happening. As I said earlier, a warmer cup of coffee is going to have a greater smell. It's going to be producing more molecules from the liquid state into the gaseous state, just like your body would do. If your body has a warmer temperature, it's going to have a greater ratio of alcohol coming out of your body. So if that is coming out of your mouth, how is it being tested? Well, you have a breath test machine. We call it the intoxilizer. That's the name of it, actually. And this machine, it doesn't change how it reads your sample depending upon what your body temperature is. This has the same calculation for you or for me or for anybody who runs through it, regardless of what our temperatures are, regardless of how this ratio exists within our own bodies. And so what it does is it expects a certain temperature of breath to be coming out of a person's body. In reality, that changes greatly. The temperature of my breath is going to be different from almost everybody's breath, but this machine does not change to reflect what the actual temperature is. It just runs everybody's sample through the same calculation, which may not be accurate. So a person's breath test a person's body who does a breath test when their body is warmer by a degree or half a degree or whatever it is, can artificially inflate what this machine is believing, because this machine believes that it's getting breath at a certain temperature and it's reversing and doing all the calculations based on that temperature. It's saying that we know what this temperature is, even though it doesn't. Therefore, it knows what this exchange rate should be. But if the body's temperature is actually warmer than that, this exchange rate is going to be much higher than it would be, than this machine is expecting. So that's a problem. And you can shave percentage points off of your BRAC test. If you did a breath alcohol test, an intoxilizer test, you can shave about 5 to 8% off of that number, depending on how your body temperature was. So that's just one way that you can attack a breath test case. There are many, many other ways, and this is a very rudimentary kind of diagram on how this all works. But if you do want to come into our office and sit down so we can explain in much greater detail and much more than 6 minutes about how this all works, we're happy to do that. We have free case evaluations. We're happy to speak with you. Thanks for watching.